Hi, I'm Gerry from Gerry's Craft Room, and in this video I'm going to make more cards with Tonic Kit 21 in a bit of a mixed media style. And I'm using up some scraps. The video is a bit longer than usual because I have lots to show you. I start with the stencil and ink on smooth white card. And I add the ink in a circular motion. I extend the pattern by moving the stencil up and ink the top part. I trim the card a bit and I ink the edges. By the way, I added the products I used in the description box for you, and if you're new here and you like what you see, don't forget to subscribe. I cut the sentiment twice out of red and white card, and this is a fast way to get a dimensional look, and easier than using the tiny pieces that come out of the die. I'm going to use some scraps to assemble the card. I cut the strip to size and add tape on both sides, and then I'm going to cut it in half. This way I know what the straight edge is. And then I add it to the top and bottom of the card. I cut and add the little glitter pieces in the corners. Now this is just playing around with your papers, creating some interest and use up your scraps, but you can also do this just for fun. And I tape the piece to a black note card. I ink the sentiment so it stands out more. I add foam tape to the back for some extra dimension. And some glitter flowers to add some sparkle, and the first card is done. On with the next card. I added ink with the stencil and then turned the card and added more ink, blocking the overlapping part with a sticky note. I'm going to add more ink in pink, blocking parts of the stencil with a sticky note again, and this gives some depth in the design. I ink the edges. I always find that it gives a nice finish. I add tape to the piece of the maroon card and wind some thread around it. Make sure it's not too tight so the card can still lay flat. I add the card to a white note card and add the card with the ink on top of that. And I'm finished with the sentiment that I add with foam tape. Another card with a stencil, but now with the expanding mousse. I add it in 2 places. Make sure the stencil doesn't touch when the first layer mousse isn't dry yet. And then let it expand with the heat tool. I'm using up more strips again to create a mat for the card. This time I use the card to measure the size and tape the strips to the card that goes on top. And I tape the card to the black note card. I put the sentiment in place and add some Nuvo drops. Then I take off the sentiment to add embossing powder and put the card aside to dry. I add the first layer of embossing powder and I'm going to melt it. And I add another layer of the same color to create some dimension. I'm going to add a white sentiment to the back, and I added a bit offset so it stands out more on the card. And then I add it to the card. The drops are dry now, just so you know. You don't want to mess it up at this point. You can add the drops at the end. I just felt like making drops before I added the sentiment, and I was still thinking what I wanted to do with it, so I worked a bit backwards. I colored a piece of white card with embellishment mousse, and I'm going to add expanding mousse on top with the stencil. And I let it expand again. It's so pretty to watch. I'm going to add some glue with the glue pen, just touching the hearts here and there, and then I'm going to let it dry a bit. And now I add the gilding flakes, just rub or brush them on softly. I brush away the excess with the dual blender brush. I trimmed the card and I'm going to add it to the golden glacier paper. I add my card in place and press it down on 3 sides, the left not just yet. I tuck the part I cut off under the gold card. And then another gold strip under the blue. I add a sentiment I cut out of the black and gold. And I finish with some stone drops. For the next card I add tissue tape to a piece of white card. Burnish all parts so they stick really well. I cut off the ends and I keep filling the card with the tape. And while you are here, have you seen the new community tab at the top? I will share new and fun things there, like behind the scenes polls and such, so you can go check that out if you like. I cut off the excess bits and I used the die to cut on one side, and I did the same on the other side to extend the design. I cut the sentiment out of black and the golden glacier card and I added to a piece of glitter card. I taped that over the washi tape piece that I added on black card. I got a frame out of the Golden Glacier card and I'm going to make a foam mat with leftover pieces. I got 2 to fit the black card and I have 2 shorter ones that I taped down first at the top and bottom. And then I add the longer pieces on top. I check with the frame if it fits. I added foam tape to the back of the frame for some dimension and then I taped the frame in place. I added tape to the back and I put the complete piece on the card. I have another piece I cut in the same way with the washi tape. I put the pearlescent card to the back and I'm going to use some pieces to make a mat. I first taped them together with regular tape. You can now cut off any bits that may stick out. Tape to the back and also on the seam, and then I'm going to put it on the card. And I add the washi tape piece on top. I cut the sentiment out of blue and white and added a blue piece behind the sentiment, and I distressed the edges. And then I added to the card. And these are the 2 washi tape cards. I hope you liked the video. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe, and make sure to keep on crafting!